Okay, everybody, this is the sewing portion of our June block of the month for our Sew a Year Full of Stars. This is the crazy star block for June, and in the first two videos I did a part 1 and a part 1A because there was a couple things that I wanted to add for the part 1. So remember to layer it how you want. Basically, contrasting is better, but this is a crazy star, so you make it as crazy as you want to. And then you have to have a minimum of 2 layers of fabric, but you can have up to whatever even number that you want. And we are experimenting with the size here, so you do whatever size that you want. I suggest more than a 1/2 inch. If you have it, so for example, my star is 6.5 inches. I suggest an inch over that for your square, for your fabric square. I think 1/2 inch. I'm gonna lose these points here. So we're gonna see how it goes. So I recommend a minimum of an inch bigger than your star, and you can measure your star size from point to point, just a straight line. So this is 6.5 inches from one star point to the other. This is 6.5 inches from one star point to the other. Same here, point to point. That's how you can measure your star size. And then minimum of 2, and whatever you want to do. Okay, so we're at this point. I don't want to beleaguer that point anymore. So in the other video just prior to this, we had exploded the star, and then we visualized putting those pieces, those little units together. Okay, so that once you do that, then you are at this point where you only have 2 straight lines. So you only have 2 more sewing lines to do, and then that block is complete, and then you do that for every block. Okay, so this is where we are right now. We're at the sewing portion. All right, I'm going to get this off camera a little bit so that you remember how to do the clockwise. You start at the 12 o'clock position and then you go around, and that makes it the easiest. I'm not going to be able to, I don't think I can keep this all on film. Let me try. Okay, so if I replace the star up on the clear, I always forget what the name of this stuff is. Plexiglass? Okay, so here's our star right here. Alright, super. We'll get rid of that. Okay, so my 12 o'clock position is going to be up here. So I'm just going to explode this a little bit. Okay, now I just have white thread in here in my bobbin and in my thread. So you just want to start at the 12 o'clock position and create your units. Remember how you do that. And if you need to, then visually, put them together like, oh yeah, those go there and that goes there. And then you create your units, okay? So you just take your first 2. And I know this is a little bit off camera right now. So you just take your first 2. Oh my gosh, I can't grab it. Okay. And then you put right sides together. So you line up the point. Now, you can use a 1/4 inch seam allowance if you want. I'm going to use a scant 1/4 inch. I'll probably use an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance simply because I cut my fabric a little too short. I'm pretty sure of that. So alright, that is our first line. And then when you open that up, do you see how you lose a little bit of fabric there, right? So, and don't worry about that because that'll be eaten up in the next placement of your fabric. So this next one comes in, and again you just line this up here, just like so. So you're going to have a little bit extra up here. So you line up the corners, line up the edge, and yeah, this is going to be extra up there, okay? Now, if you want to use your leaders, go ahead and do that. Also, if you want to iron or press so that things lay more flat, feel free. I have a tendency to press everything just because it makes my life a little bit easier when the fabric lays flat, okay? So line that up. And then there you go. You have your first star leg. And yes, things are going to be very wonky, okay? But just try to keep it as flat and as aligned as possible. So this edge is very straight. So you can see this bottom edge is very straight. So that's really what you want to worry about. We can trim the outside, no problem, but you just want to make sure that your, this edge is as straight as possible. Okay, so that is my first unit right there. I'm just going to set this aside. And then once you get the hang of it, if you wanted to, you could start chain piecing, but don't get yourself all confused. Okay, so now I'm going to take these next two, and I'm going to put this right sides together. So you line up that corner to corner, this flat edge, and then again, I'm using about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, but you can use 1/4 inch, and then you open that up, and that looks like that. Okay. Yes, I iron. And then once I have that unit, so that unit's there, then I'm going to put this unit onto here. But I'm going to iron this because this is a little, yeah, there. Press that. It's a little bit more flat. So now I know, put this here. Line up the corners, line up the edge. Make sure it's as precision as possible for now, because this is really where your star comes together. And if you start getting like super wonky here, your whole thing is going to be off. Now that could be okay because it's called a crazy star. So, that's acceptable. All right, so there we have that flat edge there. All right, guys, we're coming together now. And so I put that off to the side there. So now I have those two units. So again, I'm going to put these together. So this goes face down here. All right. Open that up, and there we go there. So again, I press it open because I like to work, especially with these small pieces, it just helps me align things up better. Okay, so now this goes here, okay? So we're going to do that. So this is a little bit of an overlay. That's no problem. So we're just going to line up this corner. Okay, so line up this corner and this edge, this corner and this edge. So you can see how the fabric goes off at a different angle. That's okay. Just line up this corner and this edge. Start at the top. Use the seam allowance, so whatever seam allowance you're using. I suggest enough seam allowance that you catch all of the fabric in that stitch, and use a closer stitch. Use a smaller stitch length, so like a 2 or so. I'm using a 3 millimeter. That's just the normal stitch length so you can see that stitch length. That's a normal stitch length that this machine uses, and I didn't change it. So you can stick with that or go a little bit smaller if you wanted to. You want your star to hold together, okay? So now that edge at the bottom here is another flat edge, right? Good. Okay, so just iron it, and I'm not worrying about, you know, which goes to which side. So if I iron to the light, then so be it. I iron to the light, okay? Onto the light side. So there we go. And now if I add this to here, do you guys see that right there? It's coming together. So now all we have to do is put these two edges together. All right. So you can start at the top, you can start at the bottom, whatever works for you here. I'm just going to start at the bottom here. And then, so you just want to line up all the way across. Yep, this is going to stick out a little bit. Don't line that up. You can even trim that off if you want to. So, just like so. Just like that, okay? And then make sure that both sides are perfectly aligned. Now it's easy, folks. It's easy to stretch this fabric. So try very hard not to stretch the fabric. Try to maintain your seam allowance. And try not to stretch the fabric. And there we go. There's that side. So this line is in the same straight line as that. So that's really what you want to try to maintain. Okay. Now there's a lot of seams coming together, so if they get a little wonky, then they get a little wonky, but I'm going to try to maintain as flat as possible. And then there we go, and then this star right here. Now if you want to, you can maintain this sewn edge right here, and that will align this sewn edge, this seam, and this seam. So you can align this seam right here. That's the only seam that you have to line up. So if you wanted to do that, feel free. Now that is going to shorten up this edge, and it's going to lengthen this edge. So if that does not appeal to you, you can shift that down a little bit. However, once you do that, note that this star leg is going to be off this seam. Okay? So if you like it there, then put it there. If you don't care and it looks super wonky and you love that, then do that. If that makes sense, okay? So I think I'm going to line up that seam. And it's just where the seams meet, right there at the edge. That is going to make my square block much smaller. I'm going to see what it does to my star point. You know what? I'm just trying to, before I sew it, I'm just imagining that this is sewn, and if I line up that seam, and then I sew this, and I just fold it back, I think I'm really going to lose that star point. So I'm going to make it a little bit wonky and line up the edges more than the seam here. We'll see how that goes. This is playtime. This is an experiment. So I'm just lining up edge to edge, this edge to that edge, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, so you can watch me do this before you do to see how it turns out. That's why it's called a quilt along. And then if I open that up, all right, let me press it. Okay, so let's do a close-up. Oh, why do I have a loose fabric? Loose thread showing through there. Okay, so all right, here's the final reveal. Okay, Look at that. So I aligned up most of the edges there, which made the star block a little bit more square than it would have been, but it offsets this star leg, if you can see that. Here, let me hold it up. Let's do a star like this. Okay. So that is a crazy. It's also wonky. Not only is it crazy, but now it's wonky. So it's a crazy wonky star. All right. Yeah. So if you wanted to, you can even set these stars on point. So it would be like this on point in your quilt. So at a diamond angle instead of, like square. So that's how that one turned out. What do you think about that, guys? Let's do the next one to see what that turns out to be. So now this fabric is really too close together in colorway. So it's going to be maybe a little bit more difficult to see the star compared to the background. However, the star is a shimmery fabric. So this star is a flat fabric, and this one has some gold flecks in it. So it actually might turn out really good. All right, let's give it a shot. I'm excited. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. I'm just going to explode this star a little bit. Okay, so these are the sections that I want, the units that I want to make. So now I'm going to pull this apart a little bit. Okay, I'm going to shift this off to the side, and then start at the 12 o'clock position and put these two together, right sides together. Line up the corners, line up this bottom corner all the way to the top. Use your seam allowance, the same seam allowance on all the stars. Do not change your seam allowance. If you start at a scant quarter inch, then you need to maintain that scant quarter inch, whatever that scant means, okay? And then this over here, same thing. So take that, line that up, and flip it over. Line up the edge at the bottom. And then wherever it goes to the top. Alright. So you can see right here, this one got a little bit off a little bit. That's going to make my star wonky and throw off my bottom edge right here. Okay, so I can go in and seam rip it, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave it. I don't think I'm going to lose a whole lot of the star points, so that's going to be good. All right, so here's my top unit. I'm just going to set that aside. Now, working clockwise down, I take this little piece here, this star leg, and attach it to the background here. So put these together, flip that over, right sides together, line up this edge. Oops, line up this edge and the side. Okay. This is the most time-consuming part, especially because we have all these different little teeny tiny pieces. Now, if you're working with anything smaller than these pieces, like if you wanted to make a 4-inch star, these pieces are going to be tiny, guys. Tiny. All right, open that up. There's our unit. Okay, and then that was this unit, right? So now we stick that to here. And if you're using a pattern or something with, directional, then that'll help you line up your fabric also. It's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle, knowing where your jigsaw pieces go. Okay, so now that is that unit. Okay. Okay, so that's that. That goes over here. It's coming together. Now these pieces come together here. So this flips onto this piece. Line the corners up. Now the bottom corner on this one does not reach all the way to the bottom, and that's fine. It's not supposed to, because you want to have that background a little bit bigger than your star point end. That's how it does not get lost in your finished quilt. Open that up. And then the last piece right here, this goes on there. Line up these 2 points right here. And again, the fabric goes in the different directions. So the bottom fabric hangs out and the top fabric goes a different way. It's supposed to. Don't get confused by this little dog tag right here, this little dog ear. Call them dog ears, I don't really know why. You can chop that off if you like, if you get confused on that. So just like that. And because it may add a little extra bulk, I am going to trim that off. So then that's there. Open that up. And that's what it looks like. There we go. Now we only have 2 more. And then we put this together. We only have 2 more passes to make. So see how the star, because these are very similar fabrics, see how they kind of get lost there? All right. Let's put it together and then we'll have another block done. Remember, be careful not to stretch your fabric. Maintain the same seam allowance throughout your entire quilt. And if a seam flips over, flip it to the direction you want. And on the back also, the ones on the bottom, if the bottom seams flip over and you catch it, you can flip them in the direction that you want them to go. Okay. Yep, everything is caught in the seam allowance, so I always check and then open that up, and there we go there. And then, because you know I like to iron this down, I'm going to do that here. Now I have been just using a dry iron. If you want to add a little bit of steam, a little bit of water to relax. You can't even see me ironing. Okay, and then so we put this together right like that. That's the last one. So flip that down like so. And again, I'm not lining up the star leg seam, I'm lining up the edge of the fabric, which will definitely make my star wonky. So keep that in mind. So when you get to the end, don't ask yourself, how did that get wonky? That's why. All right, and there we have our star. Let me press this open. Now there are a lot of seams on the back, yes. Okay. So see what I was saying with the very similar fabrics, but because this one has a gold fleck, and you can see that in the fabric, in the light there, because it has a gold fleck, it stands out a little bit better than than the background. So there's that. So there's your star. That's the second block. So here's the first one. And so you can see now this star fabric became the background for the next star, and that will continue through your pile, okay, through your layers. And there we go. There's our wonky crazy star for June. Now, the next section is to quilt this, so get your quilt sandwich. No, I'm sorry, that is wrong. Don't do that yet. So just make all your stars, and then in the next video, we're going to figure out how to trim. I couldn't find the word. How to trim these up, and then put them all together to create a 12.5-inch star. Now, if you started off with a 12.5-inch block or bigger, then it'll probably just be one star, a lone star. Or I'm just looking at my rulers there. We can trim these down and put like 4 of these together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe that'll make a 12.5-inch if it's not super big. So yeah, stay tuned for that, and we're gonna see. So go ahead and keep making these star blocks. And then we're going to come back in the next video to trim them up and attach them to make our 12.5-inch unfinished block. So if you started with really small stars, then you may have more than 4. You may have 6 or, whatever. If you started with 1, then, and it comes out to like 10 inches, then we just add sashing around the outside. If these come out to be like 5 inches, then we'll put maybe sashing on the inside, or attach all the stars and put a border sash on the outside. So we're gonna find out. We're gonna find out in the next video. All right, guys. Thanks for playing along for our June star block of the month for our Sew a Year Full of Stars. My name is Kimberly, and thank you for joining Creating Hanley. See you on the next video. Bye for now.